Hello again. So, it's been a while since my last video, and I feel as if we're due for a catch-up. Since my last video, my practice and research into chaos magic has initially ground to a halt for a while, and over the last week and a half, 2 weeks, slowly resumed. The reasons for this are as follows. Number 1. A few days after my last upload, I stupidly watched a movie called The Borderlands late at night on my own. It's a very good movie, it's very well acted, it's very well written, it's very well directed, and although the effects budget was quite small, they did a hell of a lot with what they had. Sounds great. The problem is, when you watch a very good horror movie late at night on your own, you might scare yourself stupid, which is what happened to me. I basically regressed to when I was a young teenager watching my first few real horror movies, and for the first time in a long time after watching a horror film, I couldn't sleep at night. It took a few days for me to fully get over the creep out of that. And the second reason why I stopped for a while was coronavirus. I didn't mention it in my last video because these are meant to be escapism, but there's no avoiding it. We're all living in lockdown. My own experience of lockdown has been being in the flat on my own. My flatmates have both gone off to their families to ride this thing out. Fair enough, it was a good idea on their part, but I am here by myself at the moment. Now, when you're living on your own with limited human contact for a long time, i.e. in lockdown, the mind can wander a little bit. And although I consider myself in some ways to be quite a strong-minded person, in some ways I am quite prone to getting the creeps, getting little supernatural type fears. This may seem an unlikely factor in someone that's attempting to throw himself into an occult practice, but it's just one of those little things we all have, which is normally very controllable, but you tend to be a little bit more careful of when you find yourself in an abnormal situation, just like we're all in. Although, objectively, I am moving towards the conclusion that there is no real supernatural power in chaos magic, and I'm viewing it more as an artistic expression, a different way of viewing the world, a kind of mental discipline, a way of channeling one's thoughts in new directions, all of the above. The emotions don't always listen to what the rational mind has to say, and the last thing I wanted at a time like this, when not only am I alone in the house, but I can't really go and see anyone, to allow my brain to get rattled. However, as my sister correctly pointed out, you can't really let something like a horror movie distract you from something which you've chosen to throw yourself into. And also, the exercises that I had been doing with motionlessness were working for me. I had been noticing benefits, very real benefits, in terms of feeling calmer in myself, which for someone who's been having a lot of anxiety in the workplace is an important thing, not something to let go of easily. And I'd also found myself with my powers of concentration and mental discipline in terms of keeping to a straight plan for the day being improved. These benefits which should not be turned away from lightly. And so, I have slowly but surely returned to studying the Liber Null and working through the basic syllabus. My concerns about spooking myself notwithstanding, the early stages of the syllabus, and realistically, even though lockdown seems like it's going to go on forever, it's unlikely I will have progressed to full-on sigilization and, invocation, servitors and all that kind of good stuff before lockdown is lifted. So, for the foreseeable future, the syllabus that I'm concentrating on: motionlessness, breathing, not thinking, as in practicing mental blankness as preparation for gnosis, visualization, powerfully imagining an image or idea in your head, and object and sound concentration, concentrating very intently on an object or a sound, he says, stating the bleeding obvious. These things can be done without delving into anything that might trouble my train of thought. They're just meditation exercises and can be worked on without fear of rattling myself. Moving onwards, in the unlikely event that lockdown is still in effect, and I'm in this place where if I do get worried about something, it's less easy to just go and talk to someone or hang out and cleanse your mind of it. I think that when the time does come, Chaos Magick has a great deal of flexibility, and when it comes to the point, when the time comes, as long as I stay on a positive path with it, and by that I mean, with sigilization work, don't concentrating on desires and wishes which are positive and beneficial, using it as a tool for mental and spiritual and perceptual exploration, rather than using it for selfish material needs, say. And if it does get to the stage where I start messing around with things like invocation, only positive deities, entities, ideas, nothing that could be harmful. Because, well, for two reasons. Number one, although from a rational point of view, I'm pretty sure that all of this is just thought exercise in effect, just in case I'm wrong. Why risk it? Stick with positive things. And number two, as mentioned, even if I am correct in my rational belief that although there's a great deal to it, it's not in a literally true supernatural power sense, just because I believe that from an intellectual point of view doesn't mean that my emotions are not capable of getting rattled. And so, certainly for the duration of lockdown, and probably continuing forever, keep it light, keep it positive. Yes, it's a very hippy-dippy, cutesy-pootsy, cuddly approach to magic. So be it. It is better to be a wuss than to be frightened and in a place where it's more difficult than usual to deal with it. So those are my safety protocols, just like those safety protocols for travelling when in lockdown. And as well as not wanting to give up the benefits which I've been noticing from this practice, there are other factors, which is when one is in lockdown, sometimes it's important to do something positive to stave off loneliness and the boredom. And I think that as long as I continue pushing these experiments in a positive way, and I know that that's not quite in the spirit of the libernol and not what Carroll and Sherwin necessarily intended. They did say that chaos magic naturally attracts the dark path. So be it. Very true for them. Don't need to be true for me. Rambling. So, where I am at with my practice at the moment, after going back into exercises, I finally cracked motionlessness and managed to make it for 15 minutes without moving. Still blinking occasionally, and still the odd involuntary muscle movement, but I think that perfectionism is perhaps the enemy here, because it can lead to a person being trapped in that very first stage of the exercises for their entire Chaos Magic career, which is, which would be a shame. So I progressed with motionlessness to a point where I'm happy with it. Certainly if I keep my eyes closed, I can keep it up indefinitely. And I've moved on to breathing. Just to quote the libernol again, breathing deeply in, breathing deeply out from the diaphragm, pausing between breaths if it seems like a good idea, filling the lungs, but not straining them. That is the basic methodology, and one is considered to have pushed it far enough when you can manage 30 minutes of this. So far I've managed up to 10 minutes. What I have been doing is using this particular technique quite a lot at work. I have found that 5 minutes of motionless breathing can have the same effect as a single cup of coffee, which is good for my heart. And when I've tried this last weekend while studying, it did seem to improve my concentration and retention a little bit, which is good. I have noticed some other effects once I've started mixing motionlessness with breathing. A sensation of being still whilst moving, almost floating, and a sense of slight otherness, of being somewhat more aware and feeling somewhat more grounded in my body than normal. These are good things. I've also, ever so slowly, started to develop ideas about what I want to do with all of this. So I've noticed over the last few weeks I've been seeing things a little bit differently. When I go out to work, because being technically a key worker, God help me, I'm still travelling on public transport, but when I go out to work and when I go out for walks, everything seems to be a little bit brighter, a little bit clearer and cleaner in my vision. Everything seems a little bit more interesting and a little bit nicer. Now, there are a few reasons for this. First of all, I recently started a new job which I feel much happier in, so I'm in a better mood generally. Number two, even though it's locked down and the streets are half deserted and everyone's scared, it is also early summer, and from an objective point of view, everything looks nicer because happy sunshine. So think that working on perceptions, on different ways of seeing the world, will be a good initial place to work with in this. And also, I've been talking a little bit about how playing with one's beliefs and states of mind can be a practice and indeed a goal in chaos magic. I am having some feelings which I have difficulty articulating into words because they're so personal to me, but there are certain moods that you get into when you expose yourself to certain kinds of stimuli. I've already mentioned a nasty example of that, the effect that watching one horror movie too many finally had on me, but also there is watching detective movies and shows which I've lately binge watched as an antidote to too much horror. Let's say that one has been binge watching on YouTube Poirot and Jeremy Brett's era Sherlock Holmes, and one gets a certain feeling of coziness from these shows, and also you're trying to harness the way that the heroes think in those kinds of shows and or books. Sherlock Holmes, Poirot, more recently Columbo, Luther. One moment please, sorry. Sorry peeps, needed to be sent. When watching these shows, there's an air of coziness which I get from them, but also, supposing I wanted to try and emulate and channel the mindsets of these great detectives. They're fictional characters, so fucking what? That intelligence and observant nature and mental poise that the heroes of these stories have, let's say that that's something I aspire to, something which I think would be particularly helpful to me in the current situation at work. What if using meditation and visualization and eventually sigilization, all these different exercises which are used in chaos magic, what if I would be able to actually pick up and harness that mindset for a while? A way to put it which might make more sense, I once was and hopefully will again be a therapeutic counsellor. I stopped practicing a few years ago, but the training and experience stays with a person. Now, one of the ideas that comes up in a lot of different counselling schools is ways of being, states of being. Not just a person's thoughts or a person's feelings, but a combination of what you're thinking at the time, what you're feeling at the time, what your physical state is, what your environment is, what your lifestyle is like. Everything about a person. And the term which is sometimes used in person-centered therapy is configurations. different ways of being that a person has. None is any less genuine than any other. And it's, at all times it's basically the same person, but different configurations are the ways in which the mind manifests itself through a person's behaviour to others and their general interaction with the environment around them. If you, for example, think of yourself when you've been in a very serious, studious mood trying to get something done, and at the same time think of yourself when you've been at your most willfully twatty, messing about, having fun, it's all still you, but it's two very different ways of being you. I think that these are concepts which lend themselves very well to chaos magic, and I think may even be part of why I keep getting drawn to it, even though I'm not normally into this kind of stuff. It's the exploration of the mind, and it's focusing on different ways in which you can push your mind, adapt your mind, and hone your mind. I've also mentioned in the past that I sometimes get, as in past videos, that I sometimes get intense flashbacks of images which I associate with good times or happy feelings. I think that since visualization is a part of Chaos Magic syllabus anyway, that would be a very good thing to explore. And also, I'm getting random ideas about the place of music in all of this. A good example would be, I listened to Oxygen by Jean-Michel Jarre just before going to a recent job interview, and I am sure that the way that that music helped psych me up for the interview helped me to pass it. What effect does music have when you throw it into this? Intense concentration on music. I play bass, not all that well, but we practice. One of the things which is going to slow down a practice in Chaos Magic is that I can't allow it to eat up too much time into my bass playing, so they need to be balanced, but also, can they be brought together? Austin Spare spoke about automatic writing. How about automatic songwriting, automatic bass playing? It's all a possibility. Okay, I think I've meandered a fair bit, and certainly I think this might be the longest video I've done so far. So, for now, I'm going to say goodbye again, and to anyone watching, stay tough, stay safe, look after yourself, and look after the people around you. We're going to get through this.